So we're in the second part of the latch assembly, and we're going to create this object here. Now again, we're going to be looking at from the different sides, the different profiles. So we've got the side profile here, the top and the front view. Now it's important in this case that we pick the right profile to start with. The profile that you choose to start with will help reduce the number of steps to completion and also increase the model stability. Now when we talk about model stability, we're talking about how many layers of operations we apply to a model. The smaller number of operations, the more stable the model. So if we looked at starting from the profile from say the front, as we're doing here, we will create this shape here. So we're using symmetry to our advantage. But tackling it from this point of view, we end up removing material from these points as shown in this diagram and adding the fillet around here. If we look at that workflow in the part design, using that profile, using symmetry to our advantage, we first start with a sketch. Then we create our first operation, the pad. We then create another sketch to remove this material, then create a pocket. Another sketch is created to remove the holes and this curve, and then create another pocket. We then get into our finishing process with the fillets. So we need to fillet around here to allow this to pivot and not catch on any other material. So this will be the other part of this latch. We then create another fillet to clean up this edge. And finally, we add the mirror. So all in all, we have a number of operations in here. We can vastly reduce these by choosing a different profile. So we need to be observant of what we're doing. Look for symmetry, but it's not always beneficial to use it. And we'll see that in our next workflow. Look for subtraction of material as well as addition. Let's look at a simpler approach. With this profile, we can see we can just sketch this shape. If we pad that, then we just need to remove this space. So this is negative space. So we're looking at one single sketch here, followed by a pad, and then creating this sketch within here, removing that material. We've just done the bulk of our modeling into operations. Because we've got less operations in there, we have a more stable model. If we wanted to add another feature earlier on in our tree, then we've got less operations to go through. For instance, with this model, you can see we have a number of operations. If I added an operation, say, back here with this sketch, then we would have to be wary of the operations that follow it along this tree. So adding something to here could affect all the operations in front of that, or one of these operations. If we had a smaller tree, then the model becomes more stable. This is the same in every CAD package, not only FreeCAD. Let's take a look at modeling this part using the side profile and removing this negative space. If you like what you're seeing, please subscribe to the site. I also have a Ko-Fi or a Ko-Fi site that you can donate to if you so desire, and that's at ko-fi.com/MANG0. I also run a Patreon where you can subscribe and get extra content, and that's at www.patreon.com/MangoJellySolutions. Any money that's kindly donated will be used to expand the channel. So I've already created a new document and I'm in the part design in FreeCAD. You notice we've got part 1 open already as well. I'm going to use this as a reference just to get an idea of whereabouts in 3D space I am going to place this part. Remembering back to what we said before, we're going to take this profile and remove the negative space to create this profile after we've padded the profile that we started with. So what I'm looking at is that when I build this, I really want to get an understanding of where the latch is going to be placed. I know it's going to be pulled into an assembly. It's useful to have the previous parts so we can line up the body to this and see where it sits. Let's go back to that document and reference that into our project. For that, I'm going to be using the make link. It sits up here on the toolbar. I've got the project open, part 1, and I'm going to click on the fillet, and then I'm going to use the tab to come back to my project. I haven't used The combo view, to click on it, I'll just use the tab and I'm going to create a link. It's going to ask me first to save the document. So we need to save this document first. So okay that, and save this as part 2. Now when I come back in, click on that fillet, clicking on the part 2 tab, I can now use my link, and I've linked in the fillet. There is another way of doing this. Let's just delete that fillet a second and come back to part 1. Click on the fillet and hold down the Alt key on the keyboard and lift it, and you can see we got a link there, and drop it into part 2. So we've linked across one file and placed it into part 2. So now we have this linked part. This means we can select the top and decide where this is going to sit. So I'm going to right click and transform this and rotate this around this way and hit OK. And I'm going to create a new body. So come out to create a new body. There's our body. We're going to model from this profile. So new sketch. And now we can see where that's going to go. So I'm going to go along the XZ plane. This one here. It's placed me in the center of the screen. This was created around the center. But I actually want this off to the left. So this part I want off to the left. So just go into the model, click on the fillet, right click, transform, and we'll move this over and OK that. Need to come back into the sketch and we can get an idea of where that's going to sit. So I'm going to create the part around this point here. I may want to transform this a bit more. And rather guessing, that's OK that. And come up to the view, toggle axis cross. So we can see that axis cross there. Makes life a lot easier when we're transforming the part. Right click, transform. And we'll place it about there. It's just to give us an idea of where this is going to sit and what it's going to look like. Let's double click on that sketch. So we're going to start to add our first geometry. I'm going to come up to the Arc tool and start adding geometry in an additive way. Now when I say additive way, I'm adding the individual elements of the geometry. So the first part is an actual arc that comes around here. So hit the escape to get the mouse pointer back, and from the diagram we know that this has a radius of 3 mil. So 3 millimeters. So we've added an arc. When we look back, our next geometry is a 17mm line, followed by an arc, and then followed by a vertical line. So this is additive geometry we're adding the geometry in an additive way. There is another way of adding geometry, and that's in a subtractive way, and we can combine these two together. And I'll just get in these elements, so a line, and I'm going to use the endpoint and rim point arc. I flip between the two because here I'm just creating an arc with just one connection point, because I've got the auto constraints on. So when I hover over a point, you can see we've got a coincident constraint there. So when I get to something like this, I would use a simple endpoint and rim point arc. With this one, because I was constraining to the vertical axis and the point of origin, I know I can constrain directly to these. So I use the other arc, the center and endpoint arc. So I have those constraints straight away in there. So I've added these in an additive way. I'm actually adding them to the screen, the different geometries, and constraining as I go. So 17mm. We know this arc is a radius of 16mm. So click on the arc and find the radius of 16mm. And we carry on. Now just place that point on this line. Point on object constraint. So we're adding them in an additive way. We could do this in a subtractive way, and that would require us to understand the geometry that we're laying down. For that we need to pick out the primitives. So we can see that if we look at this, it's basically a slot, and then we've got a circle or an arc that we can add in there, and we subtract one from the other using the trim tool. This can be a streaming fast way of placing down that geometry. For this one, I'm just going to use the additive. So we need some lines. So I'm going to place a line in here. It goes directly up. Hit escape and set some height. So let's pick this line and set the height. That's 2 millimeters. And we need a line going this way as well. So we'll just click on the line and set a line that goes along here. And this one was 23 millimeters. We just neaten up the constraints. Need another 2 millimeter line that goes down. Click on that. So that's to 2 mil. So these 2 points will stay in line because of the height, and we need to place a line in here as well. So using the line tool, we've got the all constraints on, so I'm rolling over. We get a coincident constraint and a coincident constraint there, and a horizontal constraint, so they're all nicely in line. Let's hit escape, pull these constraints out of the way. We have movement still, and if we look down to this one, we can see the full length of this from the back to the front is 30 millimeters. So we need to add that to our profile. So we can do that by coming in and adding a constraint to this. So let's hide the fillet a minute, and we'll add a point on object constraint to this arc, constraining this point to this line with a point on object constraint. Therefore we can take this point and set some distance using the distance of 30 millimeters. So that should have constrained that top line, but it doesn't seem to have happened. Let's have a look. I'm just moving the lines. Oh, it looks like it's a bit of a refresh problem. And it's still showing that we're not constrained. So we've got a problem somewhere. Let's just move these out of the way and see if we can find the problem. We've got this line going this way. Now let's start to move some of this. So I can't, there we go. We can move this down. It looks like this point is not connected to the vertical. And we use a point on object constraint there. So we're now fully constrained and we can create our pad. Go to task, hit close. We've got our profile. If we look at the technical drawing, we can pad this. So we're looking to pad this way by 21 millimeters. Or we could go further with the drawing and add the holes of 3 mil, then 2, and then another one of 3 mil. So it's up to you at this point what you want to do. You can add those in, or you could add them in afterwards and then do the pocket. I'm going to add those into that sketch. Let's come back into the sketch and add the first one in here, and I'm just going to add them like so, and set these two. I'm going to use them together, selecting one and then the other. We don't have to hold down the control because it's a hungry selection, and we'll set the diameter of 3 mil. This one is a 2 millimeter diameter. So we've added those in there. Now, where are these placed? Because if we look back at the technical drawing, we see we haven't got any measurements. Don't be afraid at this point to take a ruler and start measuring across the screen. For instance, I know from here to here is 7 millimeters because we can see it down here. And we can start to measure that to see if we have any relation between, say, these measurements. And if I physically measure it on the screen, then we can get an idea of where that sits. I'm going to use the 7 millimeters between these. So from this point and this point, using a length of 7mm, and the same, we zoom in, we can get to the point, there we go, this point and this point, and take a length again of 7mm. We are fully constrained. Let's close that and look at our next step, and this will be the pad. There's no point in padding to symmetry. So for instance, if we pad this way and take out this negative space, then mirror it over the other side, well, it'll be just as quick to pad all the way, all the 21mm, and then remove the negative space. We gain nothing with adding that symmetry. All we gain is an extra action. It doesn't help us in any way. Let's pad the object. Taking the sketch, clicking the pad, 21mm. Looking at it from the top, you can see what's happening. It's worth coming in and looking at the fillet and seeing where that sits. You can see that it sits off from this. So we come back into that pad and set the symmetry to plane, and then OK. Now we can attack this shape from a different profile. So from the left, which is the front. I'm going to hide this fillet. So I've got nothing to attach that profile on. We've got no face, so I'm going to use the base planes. Let's create a new sketch, looking at it from the left. New sketch, and we're going to use the YZ plane. Notice that the plane is reversed here. So I'll select that plane, it's going to flip me around the other side. That's not a problem. So we can see where that's been placed. So what we need to do is look at it from this direction, because I want these points coming in. So the moment we're around this way, so we've got to reverse the sketch. Let's close that. Look at the sketch. Come down to map reverse and set that to true. That means when I come into the sketch, we're now looking at it from the correct direction. I can use my section view, sketch, view section. So I've taken away that material so I can see inside. And I'm going to reference these two of that face there, because we need to keep this part intact when we do the pocket. So now let's create a rectangle. Make sure that these 2 points are in line. Horizontal constraint, those are in line now. And we can set these 2 points symmetrical to this line. So select one and then the other, and the last one we make symmetrical to. And then we can set a length in here of 2mm. So this will be equal to the width of this part here where it comes up. So we look at this, we can see we've got a 2mm wall here, so this one here. So that's 2mm. The height we're not worried about because we're taking material away. So as long as it's longer than this profile, then we can take that material away. So I'm going to set some height in here. I can attach it to the base. I'm just going to go for 6mm. And if we look back, that is actually the right size because we've got 8 minus the 2. So if we do have any problems, we just increase this size if we get a face that's left down here. So let's close. So our sketch is, we can see it there, it's just in the center there. And we'll use a pocket. But we need to bring it this way as well. To do that, we just go through all. That takes it all the way this way. Symmetric to plane, we'll take out the front as well. Rather than just going this way, when we create symmetrical plane, it actually goes out, creates symmetry, and actually goes out both sides, taking away that material. Let's OK that. We're almost there, we just need to add the fillets. We can see we've got a top fillet radius of 1mm. Looking around, we don't have any other fillets. If we was doing this from a different profile, so attacking it from this side, then we would have to fillet this here as well as this side here. So we're creating more features upon there. Let's add the fillets by taking this edge, control selecting the other edge, and using the fillet tool with a 1mm fillet, and OK. So we now got this object. Let's bring the other fillet back and we can see how they're going to sit. So linking in that previous fillet from the other file, we get an idea of how our model is going to look when it's going to be assembled. And now we can see that the actions that was taken compared to what we've shown before are very simple. We have a pad, a pocket, and a final fillet. Looking back at the example we showed at the beginning, that consisted of a pad, a pocket, another pocket for the holes and the arc, because it was from this profile. Previous pocket was from this profile going downwards, and then we added the fillet to round off this feature here, followed by another fillet cleaning up the edge, and then a mirror. So you can see that we have a lot more actions in our tree, whereas the previous part, we have less actions, therefore we have a more stable model. So if we change something, say in the pocket or in the pad, there's not much above it that can be affected, and if an error does occur, it can be more easily resolved than the other workflow. You've now completed part 2, and we can move on to part 3.
If you like what you're seeing, please subscribe to the site. I also have a Ko-Fi or a coffee site that you can donate to if you so desire, and that's at ko-fi.com/MANG0. I also run a Patreon where you can subscribe and get extra content, and that's at www.patreon.com/MangoJellySolutions. Any money that's kindly donated will be used to expand the channel. Thanks a lot for watching and subscribing, and I'll see you again soon.